Picture a dawn so blindingly crisp, it feels forged rather than born. A sky the color of molten iron stretching over North Africa's ochre crust. No breeze, no birdsong, just the metallic whisper of tens of thousands inhaling as one. Before you, a broad plain near the village of Naragara seems to glitter. In fact, it is spearheads catching first light. To the north stands Publius Cornelius Scipio, barely 33, eyes dark with sleepless calculation, commanding an army that has marched from Spain to Numidia to Carthage's doorstep, each league fueled by the oath to drag Rome from the nightmare Hannibal unleashed at Cannae. To the south waits Hannibal Barca himself, flecks of gray now tarnishing the hair that once streamed over alpine ridges, yet his gaze still crackles with predatory possibility. He has returned from exile in Italy with what Carthage could scrape together: old veterans of countless ambushes, green conscripts burned by desperation, and 80 war elephants whose trumpets rattle helmets across the field. Around both camps, silence pulses like a held breath in the chest of destiny. Two strategists celebrated as living avatars of Mars will finally collide face to face, student versus master, each carrying every triumph, tragedy, and ghost of the 19-year Punic struggle. Soldiers murmur rumors that the gods themselves have paused their feasts to watch which empire will inherit the Mediterranean. Somewhere, a priest drops sacrificial entrails and swears he saw them curl into the shape of an Ouroboros. Rome and Carthage devouring each other in an endless ring. Hold that vision. Because today, not only will the war's outcome pivot, but the very blueprint of how future civilizations wage decisive battle will be redrawn in blood and dust upon the plains of Zama. The road to Zama began not with trumpets but with ashes, those smoldering ruins left behind wherever Hannibal's columns lounged too long in Italy. Year after year, he prowled the peninsula, bleeding Roman manpower dry. Yet Rome refused to yield, reinventing stubbornness into statecraft. Senatorial debates thundered over whether to sue for peace. Elders invoking Regulus's ghost shouted down any notion of surrender. Out of this furnace strode a young noble, Publius Cornelius Scipio, survivor of the Ticinus, hero of Baecula, gambler of New Carthage. When Senate timidity balked at a direct African invasion, Scipio addressed the assembly with a voice that seemed to channel the Republic's buried nerve. "You fear Hannibal on our shores? Then drag him home by attacking his." Against tradition, he raised volunteer legions, drilled them in Iberian swordplay, Numidian cavalry tactics, and, more radical still, in coalition warfare that blurred lines between citizen and ally. Meanwhile, in Carthage, factions tangled like vines. Merchants hawked for peace, landed nobles clung to prestige, and the council dithered until Roman transports landed at Cape Bon. In panic, the elders summoned Hannibal from Brutium, promising reinforcements but delivering mostly levies and the fading aura of his legend. When Hannibal's fleet docked at Hadrumetum in late 203 BC, Libyan farmers left plows to watch the man whose name had terrified Roman matrons for 15 harvests. He stepped onto shore, not as conqueror, but as last defense. Over months, he scraped together an eclectic force: 12,000 veterans shipped from Italy, 4,000 fierce Iberians loyal since Saguntum, 36,000 fresh Libyan and Carthaginian recruits armed in haste, a Numidian contingent under Tychius, still skeptical of Carthage after years of Roman wooing, and war elephants bought from desert traders who swore they could outrun javelins. Across the Gulf of Tunis, Scipio had wintered near Utica, forging alliances with Massinissa, the exiled Numidian prince, whose cavalry would become Rome's saber, as well as local Berber tribes promised land and autonomy. He spent evenings studying reports of Hannibal's double envelopment masterpiece at Cannae, searching for its seams, vowing never to grant such spatial luxury. Diplomacy tried one last breath. The two generals met on neutral ground, flanked by interpreters and bodyguards who fingered sword hilts. Livy tells us Hannibal praised Scipio's daring and offered a parcel of Spain and Sicily for peace. Scipio replied that empires built on compromise rot from within. They parted with thin smiles and iron certainty. The Mediterranean was too small for both. Each army marched inland toward a district the locals called Zama, open terrain, stitched with low ridges, sparse acacia scrub, and dry wadis easy for cavalry to navigate. They parted with thin smiles and iron certainty. The Mediterranean was too small for both. Each army marched inland toward a district the locals called Zama, open terrain, stitched with low ridges, sparse acacia scrub, and dry wadis easy for cavalry to navigate. Superstitious legionaries muttered the gods were undecided. Scipio declared it a sign that two fates would separate before dawn, one ascending, one shattered. In Carthaginian camp, elephant handlers sang lullabies to keep their mounts calm. But some beasts sensed the looming storm and beat the ground with restless trunks. Hannibal walked the torchlit lines, touching helmets, promising veterans they would carve their names into the annals once more, assuring recruits they would learn courage by sunrise or never need it again. By the time the first flaming rays spilled over the ridges, both commanders had written their final letters. Hannibal's to the Senate pleading that regardless of outcome, Carthage must stand united. Scipio's to the Vestal virgins asking them to guard Rome should he fall. Then drums thundered, cornets blared, and the plain of Zama became the crucible in which 2 decades of hatred would melt into the shape of a new world order. Hannibal deployed first, anchored by his war elephants, 80 gray titans arrayed in a broad front designed to smash Roman maniples before foot soldiers even closed. Behind them, he grouped his infantry in innovative depth. First line, the raw recruits, Libyans and Carthaginian citizens, 3 ranks deep, tasked with absorbing initial shock and tiring Roman arms. Second line, the veteran Spanish and Gaul mercenaries, seasoned in close-in cut-and-slash combat. Third line, his Italian veterans, 12 to 16 ranks, personally hand-picked. The men who had survived Trasimene, Cannae, and a decade of skirmishes. These would act as mobile reserve ready to exploit or plug gaps. On each wing, he stationed cavalry. Tychaeus's 2,000 Numidian light horse on the right, 4,000 Iberian Celtic heavy cavalry on the left, both bolstered by a smattering of armored charioteers. Hannibal's intent was clear: unleash elephants to fracture Roman cohesion. Let first line fix the legions, then send mercenaries in coordinated push, while cavalry enveloped flanks. An echo of Cannae, albeit adapted to fewer horse and reliance on pachyderm shock. Scipio answered with an audacity that felt almost disrespectful to tradition. He arranged his legions not in standard triplex aces of staggered maniples, but in checkerboard columns separated by wide corridors, avenues intentionally gaping enough to swallow charging elephants without mangling infantry ranks. Hastati, Principes, and Triarii still formed depth, yet instead of overlapping, they lined up directly behind one another, creating lanes of empty space from front to rear. Along each corridor stood clusters of hornblowers and skirmishers armed with burning javelins, tasked with herding or spooking elephants once they entered the kill zones. On the wings, Massinisa's 4,000 Numidian cavalry faced their ethnic cousins under Tychaeus, while Laelius commanded 3,500 Italic and Roman heavy horse opposite the Iberian Celt contingent. Scipio's objective? Neutralize the elephant threat, hold steady through initial infantry waves, then use superior allied cavalry, once they won flanks, to hammer Hannibal's reserve from behind, flipping the Cannae script onto its creator. The opening trumpet blasts tore through morning stillness like a jagged seam. Carthaginian cornac riders jostled their mounts forward. Elephants, ears fanning, trunks raised, began lumbering across the plain. Roman skirmishers awaited until beasts closed within a stone's throw. Then a cacophony erupted. Horns blared disorienting shrieks down the corridors. Sling bullets thwacked sensitive hides, and flaming javelins arced, embedding into leathery flanks. Some elephants, maddened by pain and sound, bolted through designated lanes, as Scipio predicted, emerging harmlessly behind Roman lines where auxilia units stood ready to shepherd them further away. Others panicked sideways into Carthaginian right cavalry, trampling Numidian riders, sowing confusion. Only about a dozen beasts maintained straight charges into Roman ranks. These inflicted local havoc, tossing legionaries like rag dolls, but gaps quickly closed as Triarii jabbed upward with pila into bellies. Within minutes, the grand pachyderm gamble dissolved into dust, trumpets, and crashing silhouettes stumbling off-field. Seeing the elephant's screen fail, Hannibal signaled his first infantry line. Libyans advanced with spears level, while Carthaginian citizens, many bearing new shields still smelling of dye, marched chanting ancestral hymns. They collided with Rome's hastati in thunder of bronze and iron. Scipio's front line bent but did not break. Legionaries fought in learned discipline. Jab, shield bash, step, knowing fresh principles waited directly behind. The real test emerged when Hannibal's second wave, Spain's falcata-wielding mercenaries, surged forward to overlap the recruits and renew momentum. Their curved swords hacked through shields, rhythmic ululations, unnerved younger Romans. Scipio countered by ordering principes to press forward through gaps, effectively rotating fresh men into the maelstrom while hustling fatigued hastati to flanking positions along the alleyways. The Roman front became a living conveyor belt of lethal stamina. No cohort remained under sustained stress long enough to crumble. Meanwhile, on the wings, Massinissa's Numidians lit the morning like comet tails. Their history with Tychaeus' riders made the clash as much personal as tactical. Both groups executed feigned retreats, swirling javelin exchanges, and rapid pivots. But Massinissa's men had one crucial edge. They fought for their homeland, promised by Scipio to be recognized as an independent kingdom if Rome triumphed. Tychaeus' force, by contrast, hedged loyalty between Carthage's coin and Numidian tradition, and the earlier elephant chaos had already nicked their morale. After a furious half-hour, Massinissa's trumpet gave a signal. A wedge of 500 picked riders crashed into Tychaeus' center, while twin wings enveloped flanks, scattering the Carthaginian right into panicked retreat. On the opposite wing, Lacae Aelius's heavier cavalry met the Iberian Celt horse in brutal melee. Spears splintering, riders grappling blade to blade. Iberians initially held, leveraging weight of mail and stallions. But once Massinissa routed Tychaeus, he pivoted across rear of battlefield in a wide arc, arriving like a dust-shrouded storm behind Iberian backs. Hannibal's left flank now disintegrated in turn, horsemen boiling off the field in search of safety. Massinissa and Laelius did not chase indefinitely. They regrouped beyond ridge, out of sight, refitting straps, bandaging mounts, awaiting Scipio's prearranged horn call for decisive rear assault. Back at the infantry front, the fight reached crescendo. Hannibal's first two lines had spent their fury. Many recruits lay dead or feigned death to escape gore. Spanish mercenaries, though still lethal in pockets, found themselves unsupported. Hannibal committed his ace, the Italian veterans. These men advanced with the precision of gladiators, shields lacquered black with pitch to dull sun glare, pilla thrown not for kills, but to disrupt shield walls. They formed dense phalangitical files aimed at the seam between Roman center and right, where earlier rotation might have loosened cohesion. Scipio recognized the ploy and executed a maneuver few commanders dared in active melee. He ordered his bleeding but unbroken front ranks to step aside, opening a deliberate void into which Hannibal's veterans marched. Momentarily triumphant, but now bracketed by fresh Roman forces on three sides. At that exact heartbeat, Scipio's signaler blasted the triple staccato horn. Cavalry recall. From behind ridge thundered Massinissa and Lelius. They slammed into the exposed rear of Hannibal's elite line, lances punching through wicker shields, hooves fracturing skulls. Hannibal's veterans fought like cornered lions, yet surrounded, their square compressed. Scipio ordered a general advance. Legionary standards dipped, then plunged forward. Sand turned crimson mud. Screams rose, ranks dissolved into individual duels. Hannibal, recognizing the pattern of Cannae reversed upon himself, allegedly remarked to an aide, "The gods taught this Roman too well." He tried to rally center, but with cavalry sabers now scything through rear files, and Libyan spearmen collapsed on flanks, the Carthaginian formation imploded. What followed was slaughter measured not in tactics, but heartbeats. Some Iberians cut throats of horse in desperation to create barricades. Others knelt, blades extended in surrender gestures Romans sometimes honored, sometimes ignored depending on heat of skirmish. Hannibal's personal guard formed ring around their commander, carving escape corridor south. He fled not in cowardice, but in duty. Carthage would need a negotiator. By midday sun, Scipio's standards fluttered over a field littered with broken elephant harnesses, snapped sword hilts, and bodies stacked like driftwood along ephemeral sand ridges. Estimates vary. Carthaginian losses, 20,000 dead, 15,000 captured. Roman casualties around 4,000. But numbers cannot convey the spiritual amplitude. The strategic heartbeat of Carthage skipped, then faltered, while Rome's pulsed with empire-sized ambition. Scipio did not allow euphoria to dull caution. He called legionaries to formation, counted surviving cohorts, dispatched scouts toward Carthage's walls. That night he permitted no looting, only burial details and water distribution. Discipline he considered the true edge over Hannibal's brilliance. In Carthage, council sessions devolved into wails. Envoys were dispatched to Scipio's camp with olive branches, gold, and pleas. Scipio demanded unconditional surrender of navy, hostages, war elephants, and tribute so steep it would push Carthage into economic twilight for generations. Hannibal urged acceptance. Some nobles spat on the proposal but lacked soldiers to object. Within weeks, treaties were inked on Roman tablets. Scipio gained the agnomen Africanus. Massinissa gained a throne, and Carthage gained a leash so tight that when it finally snapped half a century later, the city itself would burn. Beyond immediate politics, Zama detonated cultural shockwaves. Greek observers who once claimed only Hellenes could master strategy now studied Roman drill manuals. Numidian cavalry became fashionable mercenary units from Asia Minor to Gaul. Even within Rome, veterans of Scipio's revolutionary manipular reforms carried lessons into civic life, lobbying for more flexible approaches in Senate debates, engineering, and law. As Plutarch later mused, Zama proved the greatest victories are won not by duplicating yesterday's genius, but by outlearning it. And what of Hannibal? He lived on as merchant overseer, then political reformer, then hunted exile, forever the specter in Rome's nightmares. Yet even his enemies spoke his name with reluctant reverence, acknowledging that without his menace, Rome might never have discovered the iron in its marrow, nor birthed leaders like Scipio. The plain of Zama thus became both tomb and womb, burying Carthage's dreams, birthing Rome's imperial epoch, and gifting military academies eternal fodder for war room chalkboards. Stand upon the wind-scraped plateau where olive trees now root through ancient bones, and close your eyes. Let the silence fill with phantom hoofbeats, with the clash of Iberian steel against Roman iron, with the defiant trumpet of a lone elephant before it collapses. Feel how the very soil seems to hum with decisions made in split seconds, decisions that determined which language would dominate law, which gods would crumble, which architectural styles would arch across continents. Zama endures not merely as final chapter of the Punic Wars, but as living parable. That adaptation can trump experience, that alliances forged in vision can shatter entrenched power, and that even legends must answer to the next generation's ingenuity. When modern boardrooms strategize takeovers or generals plot multi-domain operations, the ghosts of Scipio and Hannibal still haunt the periphery, whispering cautionary and inspiring tales in equal measure. If this journey through Africa's decisive dawn ignited your curiosity, join our ongoing campaign to resurrect the battles that sculpted civilization. March with us by smashing the subscribe legionary shield. Ring the bell so future episodes deploy straight to your encampment. And rally comrades by sharing this chronicle across your social cohorts. Then draw your gladius in the comments. Tell us which forgotten clash, maybe Cynocephalae's phalanx crunch, or the naval fury of Salamis, you want dissected next. Your passion is the muster roll we answer. Your engagement, the eagle standard we follow. Sharpen your wits, oil your armor. The next great turning point waits just beyond the horizon. And together, we will meet it at a run.